This is it. You came to the right place. This is the much anticipated ADCC leg lock video. And in my past ADCC videos, we've talked about things like Ushiro reverse X guard and how we can use choi bars to set up our leg entries. So in an attempt to not repeat myself, we're going to talk about the evolution of leg locks and how back in the day, a lot of people used straight ashi garamis to get a lot of success with outside heel hooks. But people started to counter these classic reap positions with counter leg locks and figured out different ways to pass these straight ashi garamis into very dominant positions. So the leg lockers placed a huge emphasis on developing their cross ashi garami game, and the inside heel hook became a very dynamic and devastating submission that took over the world of grappling. But now people are starting to recognize these entries like K-guard or the false reap, and people have developed very good defense for cross ashi garami. And we are starting to see less and less inside heel hook finishes. So in response to the rise in cross ashi garami defense, a lot of leg lockers are electing to transfer from cross ashi garami to a straight ashi garami and try and finish with an outside heel hook. So I think this ADCC showed us that the pendulum may be swinging back in the direction of straight ashi garami. And Danaher talks about this in his recent interview with Lex Friedman.
When you go to entangle your opponent's legs, the basic choice you have is between straight ashigarami and cross ashigarami. In the last 5 years, cross ashigarami has proven to be statistically the more important of the two. And as a result, many people have forgotten the value of straight ashigarami based leg locks.
Gordon had tons of success in ADCC with straight ashigaramis, and in part it's because his opponents don't want him to enter into cross ashigarami. So as they hide from the cross ashigarami, the straight ashigarami becomes available. And because the match between Gordon and Nicky Rod gets a lot of clicks, we're going to first talk about this new trend, and then we're going to discuss how it played out in their match. And I also wanted to apologize to Kolobate, because I recently made a video about him and mentioned how he uses this leg lace position from inside Senkaku to try to get the finish. And I said that this was a sign that his leg locks were not the best because I didn't see any high-level leg lockers using this strategy effectively. And then one of the best leg lockers in ADCC used the leg lace. So it's just kind of the nature of making public videos in a very fast-changing sport. And I think this is the perfect example of how my ideas and opinions will change as I grow and develop. Because 1 month ago, I literally said that this was a sign that someone was not a very experienced leg locker. And in this video, we're going to talk about how I think it's going to pave the way for the new trend in leg locking. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with the latest trends, and let's dive into the video. I wanted to start this video off talking about heel exposure, and it's something we've talked about in the past, but if your head spins to the inside of your opponent's legs, that means you're going to have immediate heel exposure when you come out the other side. Now, if your head spins to the outside of your opponent's legs, you're going to need to transfer their foot from your bottom shoulder to your top shoulder in order to get heel exposure. And that's why a lot of these new entries like the false reap involve spinning your head to the inside where you get immediate heel exposure. And Craig Jones had a few sneaky false reap entries during ADCC. For this first one, he sucks in the far leg where he could throw over his outside leg as a reap and go into a straight ashigarami. But as Kainan opens his knee to prevent the reap, Craig uses this as an opportunity to reach for the near leg and enter into that false reap. Now, kind of the same idea of switching legs, Craig starts to initiate a K-guard entry on that near leg. And as Marigali defends that entry, Craig tries to use it as an opportunity to enter into the far leg. And Craig does this entry very beautifully by setting it up with the K-guard entry on the near leg before taking his false reap grips on the far leg. And he's able to use the false reap to enter into inside Senkaku. But again, people are very good at defending cross ashigarami nowadays, and Craig really wanted to get the finish, and although he ends up on top, he was not able to end the match. And Craig tells us why that's the case in his YouTube video breaking down this sequence.
In the sequence was I didn't reinforce the grip on the knee. I was already too busy with that inside arm thinking of grabbing the heel.
It's not just Craig. I think a lot of people are falling into the trap of going for heel exposure way too early. And we're neglecting the principle that made leg locks so popular and effective to begin with. And that is the principle of double trouble. And you can see the second time Gio rolls through, he doesn't roll through with the intention of exposing the heel. He rolls through with the intention of securing that second leg. But the issue is when Gio tries to finish, he lets go of that second leg and tries to expose the heel. But as soon as we let go of that secondary leg, people are able to go into their very well practiced cross ashigarami defenses and go into their escapes. And you can see a very similar situation with Kieran here, where he rolls through and tries to expose Ethan's heel, but Ethan is able to defend with that second leg. So the next time that they roll through, Kieran is first prioritized with securing that secondary leg, and then he focuses on heel exposure. But I just think there's too many times where we have control of the secondary leg and we get a little glimpse of heel exposure and we try and dive on it. And often that leads to our opponent getting a chance to defend. You can see here we hit a beautiful inside spin that results in a good amount of heel exposure, but we also have no control over our opponent's secondary leg and our shoulders are facing the ceiling. So our opponent is going to be able to backstep and start defending the heel hook. Now, I'm not saying these types of entries don't work, and in fact, I would highly recommend you learn them through platforms like Submeta, but what I am saying is in an ideal situation, you're able to do an inside spin where you control both legs, which buys you time to get a good catch on the heel and start to turn your body belly down. So now if they try and backstep, their leg is going to break. And some people just don't care. They're going to backstep anyway and let their leg break. But the point I'm trying to make is that we're drifting away from the idea of double trouble. And because we are neglecting this principle, that is what is allowing our opponent to defend effectively. And a lot of times when they're rolling to hide their heel, they're going to be setting up berimbolo back takes, or we try and counter that movement by switching to a straight ashigarami and trying to finish with an outside heel hook. But a lot of times this is not as effective as you would think, and our opponent ends up escaping. And I think the correct way to go about solving this problem is to go back to the idea of double trouble, the idea of negation of movement, and the idea of control leading to submission. And that is where the Z-lock shine during ADCC. You can see Diego Pato here in reverse ashigarami, which is the same position that Craig Jones used against Jake Shields to enter into inside Senkaku. And for those of you that are more observant, you can see that Craig Jones used a more traditional leg position when controlling from inside Senkaku, whereas Diego Pato elects to use what's called a crisscross ashi when entering into the position. But that's not really what I want to focus on. I want to focus on why Diego Pato chooses to use this weave position. And I don't think it's to attack toe holds. You can see Diego Pato using this weave position to initiate his spin underneath and transfer to the Z-lock. You can also use the Z-lock to transfer back to inside Senkaku, but again, from this position, we have to deal with the issue that Danaher has been talking about since his very first instructional, and that is the idea that a lot of times, in order to expose the heel, we have to release the secondary leg. And sure, as your opponent defends, you can try and transfer to a straight ashigarami and attack an outside heel hook. That will probably work in a lot of matches that the average person is going to be competing in, but in a tournament where people are willing to eat a belly down inside heel hook, I think the chances of this working as your opponent is aggressively spinning and trying to free their knee is going to be very slim. And a huge advantage of the Z-lock is that you never have to release the secondary leg to get the finish. In this scenario, the primary leg is the one with the red band on it. And as Diego Pato enters the Z-lock, both of his hands are prioritized with securing that secondary leg. And with both his opponent's legs locked up, Diego Pato is able to control his opponents for minutes at a time while he works to get the finish. And it reminds me of the days where people like Gary Tonin were controlling people with inside Senkaku for minutes at a time before getting the finish. So naturally, I want to learn more about this Z-lock. And Flow Grappling posted a video referring to Johnny as a proponent of the Z-lock.
We train together. He's doing his thing, and well, he knows it. That's it.
And after digging a little deeper, Johnny definitely does this Z-lock a lot, especially from De La Hiva, where he likes to slip his knee inside that De La Hiva hook, throw in his reap, and enter into the Z-lock. Another entry, which I think is going to be my favorite entry, is from an X-guard type situation, or Jenny calls it modified X, where we thread our near leg through as a reap to enter into the Z-lock position. And as we watch this again, just listen to how confident Johnny is when attacking from this position.
Your knee's okay?
He kindly asks his partner, who is wearing a knee brace, if his knee is okay moments before he enters into the Z-lock. Now, I know Johnny didn't use a full X-guard when entering into this Z-lock, but we've talked about before how the top person can post and backstep over that bottom leg and attack a heel hook of their own. And as they do that, the bottom person can counter with a reap, and the top player can counter that counter with a bolo attempt. So the point I'm trying to make is that this is a very dynamic position and a lot can happen. So why was my man Johnny so confident that he was going to be able to enter into the Z-lock? And I think he asked his partner if their knees were okay only once he secures that second leg. Once Johnny secures that second leg, I think he is very confident that he's going to be able to enter into and finish the Z-lock. And if you want to learn how to do these entries from De La Riva or the modified X position from Johnny himself, he has an instructional on BJJ Fanatics. Now let's talk about what you all clicked on the video for, and that is the matchup between Gordon Ryan and Nick Rodriguez. Now we've talked about this entry on previous videos, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but basically Nicky tries to run away, it doesn't work, so he comes down to his knees.
Elected to go to his knees, that will set up his favorite body lock passes, and it will in some ways mitigate some of the dangers associated with leg locks.
Now, when John Danaher says in some ways mitigate some of the dangers of leg locks, to me that sounds like he's trying to be respectful when saying it's not a very good idea. Now, I believe it was Craig, it could have been someone else, but I think it was Craig, who said that the idea is that if someone is standing, it's going to be much easier to invert underneath them. But it's also going to be much harder for them to make a secure connection to your leg. Whereas if you're on your knees, it's going to be harder for them to invert underneath you, but if they do, it's going to be very easy for them to make a secure connection to your leg. And Gordon is off balancing Nicky to put his hand on the ground and using a cross lat frame to keep it there as he inverts underneath. And because Nicky is on his knees, he first has to stand up before he can try and explosively run away. And as he stands up, Gordon secures that second leg, but then Gordon lets go of that second leg to enter into inside Senkaku and takes what I've heard called a tombstone grip. And the idea is it makes it hard for your opponent to turn in the direction that would hide their heel and gives you the opportunity to sit up and attack an inside heel hook. But Nicky turns in the direction that the grip allows and exposes the hamstring of Gordon Ryan. So in response, Gordon switches his grip, allowing him to create knee bar type pressure, which forces Nicky to turn back in the other direction. And Gordon uses this as an opportunity to transfer to a straight ashi garami and trap Nicky's secondary leg in what Brandon calls the knot. So Gordon transferred from a cross ashi garami to a straight ashi garami and had Nicky's second leg completely wrapped up to get the finish. So I think the trend is going to be we're going to start seeing a lot more straight ashigaramis. And I don't mean using straight ashigaramis as a last-ditch effort to attack an escaping opponent. And I don't mean entries where we pummel in a butterfly hook and hope it doesn't fall out as we sit back to attack the legs, because that may lead to us getting counter leg locked. I'm talking about straight ashigaramis that allow us to control both our opponent's legs and go into strong finishes. And we're already starting to see top athletes like Damian Anderson starting to incorporate these straight ashigaramis into their game. And more importantly, how they connect to the cross ashigarami game that we've spent so much time developing. And to end this video, I just wanted to bring up that as far as I know, the Z-lock position and the Z-lock submission both have the same name. And I think as we proceed down the path of the Z-lock, I think we need to follow the advice of John Danaher and separate the controlling position from the finishing position. I think it's going to stunt the growth of the position if we name the control and the submission the same thing. And I'm not going to be the one to do it, but I just wanted to bring up that as a community, I think we need to make sure that we don't call the control and the submission the same thing. So if you made it this far in the video, I really appreciate your support. Please leave a fist bump in the comments section and we'll see you in the next video.